we reach the one of the most exciting part of this session, which is going to be success story sharing. And then here we have Dyshay, who actually passed the PMP last week, attended the study group earlier, which is even, makes my heart even more warmer in this area. And now here she is. She's going to help us, giving a bit of a feedback that how she passed the exam. So what's going to happen? I'm going to asking a couple of questions. And so technically, I'm going to interview her. On the meanwhile, if you have any question, feel free to put it into the chat, or you can raise your hand, and one by one, you can ask the question. Because let's go with a structured approach, same as with the PMP. We need to have a plan to get things done. Same here. And this way, we're gonna, make this experience, I would say, good for everyone on the call. All right. So Dyshay, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
This is awesome. And starting with congratulations for passing this exam. I think that's an enormously huge achievement, a major milestone in your career. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do, so let's have a look one by one. So when was your exam exactly? What was the date?
My exam was April 17th. It was on a Wednesday.
17th. You went to the test center, or you did it at home?
I went to the test center.
Why did you went to the test center?
Because I'm a researcher, so I had to research a lot of people who had done both options, and I just heard so many horror stories about taking it at home.
Okay.
So for me, I just didn't want any outside distractions or anything that may disqualify me from the exam. No internet hacking up or anything like that. So I thought it was better for me to go into a testing center to take it. I know that's not always convenient for everyone. By doing that, it did push my test out later than I really wanted, but I utilized the time. So I highly recommend the testing center because you don't have to worry about your internet failing. You don't have to worry about outside distractions when it comes to taking your exam.
Okay, yeah, that's technically, you're reading my mind with this. I also keep telling anyone, you need to go to a test center just because a more isolated environment. And as you are truthfully, mentioning it as well, you equally hear good stories and bad stories. And I think it's nothing worse than, oh, you write to the proctor person and say, I forgot to plug in my charger. I mean, can I move away from the, the camera angle for 2 seconds, just plug it in? And they say yes. And you do this and you come back and the exam is finished. And they say you failed the exam. And you go like, what the heck just happened? So yeah, trying to go to a test center, and this is for everyone. Sometimes there might be some challenge in terms of the available dates, but yeah, highly recommend to everyone to go to the test center. Okay. All right, this is good. Center. Okay, so in terms of the preparation materials, I remember on the post you mentioned you have a lot of things. So what materials you had in terms of the PMP prep?
So I'll first start with your material. This free weekly study session was very helpful for me. It allowed me to hop on during my lunchtime, so I got studying in during the daytime. I work a full-time job, so a lot of my studying had to come in the evenings. I'm also a mom, so I had to finish studying where I could. So I used Gabbard's weekly study sessions. One of the biggest things, since you guys are on here and utilizing this free resource, I want to say he was the first person that actually introduced me to drag and drop questions, and I received 3 of those on my exam. So those are very helpful. And another thing that I really took from these study sessions were how to actually break down the question. So you would read the question, he tells you how to read the question, and then how to determine if it's an agile or waterfall question, which then allows you to turn on your PMP mindset and helps you better select the correct answer regarding that. So the way that he breaks down questions for you and helps you determine how to select the best answer is what I really gained from being on his study sessions. I also use David McLaughlin's YouTube videos. I think that's very helpful. So I drive an hour into work every day. And so having his videos on YouTube, he has waterfall videos, agile videos, and hybrid videos. And just listening to those while I'm riding to work allowed me to take some practice questions without having to be sedentary. And so I think, or without allowing me to have a computer, I just had my phone up as I was driving and listening to him answer some questions. So I gained knowledge that way. I took Andrew Ramadal's 35-hour course prerequisite.
Okay.
And then I would say the biggest thing that really helped me, which was the last resource that I actually got because I was contemplating on whether it would be useful for me. I've heard so many good things, pros and cons, was PMI Study Hall.
Okay.
So I didn't get PMI Study Hall until the last 3 weeks of studying. But I will say the study hall questions were the most like the exam for me, and they were really hard. But I think having these hard questions really made the exam easier to take. And so
that's
I
something
highly
you can also recommend. Sorry.
Yes, I highly recommend study hall. I wasn't going to do it. I went back and forth for a couple of weeks, and like I said, I didn't get into the last 3 weeks, but I highly recommend PMI study hall questions. I think I averaged a 70% on their mock exams and practice questions, but really understanding why you missed the question and understanding why something is the correct answer, it's what you would gain out of the PMI study hall. And the way that the questions are formulated, the length of the questions, how they ask the questions. We all know you can ask the same question to get the same exact answer a lot of different ways. I think the way that PMI study hall phrases their questions was most like the exam for me.
Well, I would say technically, that is coming from the source. Nobody has exactly the same, but the PMI study hall can offer, because I would say every creator is, creating their own questions or simply get someone else's question and rewriting those. So and that's the reality in the end of the day. I mean, study hall is great. And I mean, one extra caveat to all of you. So PMI will never admit, but they actually categorizing their own questions. Why is that? Because the study hall, there is categorization, I think, low, medium, intermediate, and expert level questions. And the expert level questions are the most difficult. And according to the PMI website, so any given time, everyone will get different set of questions. So let's say 3 of you sitting right next to each other, according to PMI, everyone will get different set of questions. So the passing rate will be different. Now, why is that? Because you can get more expert questions from the database, so the passing rate will be lower, or you can get more easier questions, so the passing rate will be higher. So study hall, I would say good things, but I mean, the only downside, what I see that in terms of the explanations are not super good, because when you see an explanation saying that here's a PMI article from 2019 on the PMI library, you go like, but you guys said that is all in the PEM book guide, PEM book 7, process practice guide, agile practice guide. What do you mean? I should have been read all the articles on the PMI website for this question? And I mean, you can be slightly disappointed on those answers, but yeah.
Yeah, I will say PMI Study Hall didn't explain a lot of the questions, like you said, the best way. I think also I didn't really care for the articles. I only really used PMI Study Hall to get the practice questions in.
Right.
I didn't care for the articles, but yes, a lot of the materials that they've referenced was outdated. So my suggestion would be to people, the PMBOK 7 is a free resource guide that you get when you sign up for PMI and everybody. So if you get a question related to a particular topic or concept and you get that question wrong in PMI Study Hall, you can always refer back to that section in your PMBOK 7, PMBOK Guide 7 for more clarification resources, because PMI study hall's explanations aren't that great. But I still recommend it. There are a lot of cons to it, but there are also a lot of pros to it as well. But I got the less expensive one. I saw some questions. So you don't need the higher one. It's totally up to you, but I did the less expensive one, and I felt like with all of the resources that I use, I'm a type of person that has to use multiple resources. I get things from each person. And so that works for me when it came to my studying.
Okay. No, I mean, that's exactly the feedback I think which we all need, because there is no, one size fits all. I mean, if people can go to different things. I think, the essentials, the $49 one, they will give you, I think, 2 full mock exams, whereas the plus version will give you 5. I would say, yeah, it all depends, I would say, personal preferences. But in the end, you need to have one. I think that's really the answer. You need to have a simulator which will giving you challenging questions which really prepare you for the exam. So I would say that is important. Perfecto. All right. Now in that case, so let's go for the third one. What was your study duration or your study plan? So when did you started studying? How many days you studied within a week and stuff like that?
So because I work a full-time job, I knew that I had to dedicate at least 2 hours sometime within each day to kind of get the necessary hours I wanted in for a week's time. So I started officially, I would say in January is when I started taking my 35-hour prerequisite course. In order to apply for the exam. And I think I finished that mid-February. Again, I work a full-time job, so the evening times and weekend times was the only time I had. And I didn't want to cram 4 or 5 hours in on the weekend. I wanted to keep a steady pace so I didn't get burnt out between working a full-time job and studying. So mid-February was when I finished my prerequisite course. I applied for the exam, and once it got accepted, I went ahead and scheduled my exam right away. I suggest scheduling your exam right away. For one, it puts you on the books because exams can be pushed out way longer. And then it makes you procrastinate. Secondly, now you have a date that is set, and it pushes you to study. It forces you to really hone in on that timeline that you have. So mid-February is when I really started studying with all the resources that I named for you guys. And then I set for an exam in April. And so every day I would just study.
So you planned it like 8 weeks away
Yes.
from that day.
So
Like
I
2
think
months.
8 weeks is a great time. If anybody's looking about, well, how many times? I know I've heard from 8 to 12, and it just depends on what you have going on in your life. But if you are on a shorter timeline of 8 weeks, it's definitely possible.
Okay, that's a good one. So after once you completed the course, so by mid-February, but after that, so how many days you studied within a week? So like 5 days or 6 days?
So my goal was to study every single day, 7 days a week.
God.
I think I might have missed, let's be realistic. I maybe missed 1 day per week that I just didn't have it in me, depending on how the day went. I would suggest at least studying at least 5 days a week. So you have 7 days in a week, at least study something 5 days a week. For me, 2 hours was a good study time. So if I knew I had something to do in the evening, or I had a lot going on family wise, I would study an hour during the daytime and then an hour at night. Or if my day was busy at work, I would study 2 hours in the evening.
Okay. No, I mean that's good information.
And so that's what worked for.
I mean, my feedback to that, everyone have to experiment what works for you. Like, which days will works for you. Can you do it in the morning or at the lunchtime or in the evening, or in the evening you cannot do anything because of all the other things are happening. So, I mean, don't be afraid to make adjustments. But what we're trying to avoid is the burnout. And I think, I'm glad you realized that, doing 7 days is a great idea. Maybe I can do a week, but the week after I cannot do it. So what's going to happen? I'm not going to prepare for the exam. You need to leave time to make sure it's sinking in. My advice to anyone, 5 days, 2 hours, a good 10 hours, that's what you invest in on a weekly basis. It can get you there within 8 weeks. But obviously, if you can do more, that, your goal can be achieved, sooner as well. So that's a good one. One good question from Tyrell, which is, so when this is all about the studying, so technically from after you finish the course, now what did you do on that 2 hours? So that 1 hour break, what did you do?
And so I would, okay, so let's say the days that we had the study session, right? Well, you have a 1 hour study session. So that 1 hour study session counted towards that 1 hour for me during that day.
Mm-hmm.
But that only happened 1 week. So on the day that I knew that Gapper was having his study session, I counted my 1 hour study. And then in the evening, I would go home and study, which may entail listening to YouTube videos by David McLaughlin, or get into a PMP study guide. I use Andrew Ramadal's that comes with, he has a PMP simplified book that comes with his course. It's a free resource that comes with his course.
Okay.
And so I utilize that. Or I would go into PMI study hall and do practice questions and reading. And so on an average, my day-to-day look like I'm driving into work, I'm listening to YouTube videos. And then in the evening, once I can get home and get settled and I can sit down, is when I will open book materials that I had that I was studying. Or I can open up PMI study hall and go through some questions and really understand. One big thing I learned by taking practice questions and exams. So I do highly recommend using a simulator, using practice questions, because I learned by if I got it wrong, and it also
Right.
tests the knowledge you already know, so you know what to focus more on and what not to focus on. So if you're answering questions, what you got right is obviously knowledge that you gain, or you were able to have the right PMP mindset while reading that question. But if you got something wrong, now you know you can dig deeper into what's the correct answer, why, and then that helps me remember going forward. So that's how I learned best that way, and I hope that answers your question, Tyrell.
I think
When
it did. So
when did I ultimately feel ready?
okay.
I don't know that I felt I I went into the day exam not feeling really ready. I just think always I think we just always kind of have that fear within us. I think I was ready, but I was trying to psych myself out that I'm not.
Let's make it more specific. So what was the highest score on the full mock exam?
So my highest score was a 76%.
Okay, and how close was that toward the exam?
That was a week before.
Okay, now there you are ready. So
Yeah.
that was, I would say, the ultimate readiness factor, that technically that close to the exam date, you're reaching, like 76%. Because, I mean, this is for everyone. I mean, you cannot, so let's say once you're reaching like the 75 or an 80%, you cannot maintain that for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks whatsoever, because otherwise you keep investing 2 hours or even more, or you're joining me and we both of us going to preach PMP on a day-to-day basis to others. But I mean, it's hard to maintain on that level of kind of accuracy of you answering a lot of questions, because we are reaching a peak point. And once you're reaching like 76%, that means like, I think 134 out of 180, whereas the 80% is just 6 more questions, which, okay, overlook these details and not paid attention. So I would say that ultimately, as soon as you mark for 70% on a full mock exam, you can book the exam 2 weeks after that, but you need to make sure that you're climbing upwards on that passing rate cycle. Okay? Okay, 1 week before the exam. Okay, perfect. That is excellent. Oh my goodness, so many things we discussed. Okay, so in terms of the lessons learned, so I captured a couple of things. Now, is there any other lessons learned you wanted to give to the guys on the call that will be useful for them for the exam, or you might wanted to do it differently? I don't know if you have to redo it again, but hope you never have to redo it again.
So the first lesson learned is really understand agile. I think agile is becoming more prominent. I had a lot more agile questions. I had some traditional questions, but I had a lot more agile on my particular exam. And then also the biggest thing, if you don't take anything from what I said today, is develop the PMP mindset. And what that means is really take away your work experience or how you may do something in your real life right now and really understand the PMP mindset. There are a couple of YouTube videos on it. It's kind of how like Gabber goes through his questions when he's breaking them down. As really is when you're reading a question, determine is this a traditional question or is like this in agile question, and then how do you move or answer that, or what is the next step you would take following the PMP mindset?
I'm absolutely in line with you. Is again, the more we understand why they believe things should work the way they believe should work, the easier this will get. Because I think we can go against it and say, "Oh, I disagree," but like, okay, you want to pass the exam, so you better agree and accept it, then you move on. Because I would say that I do remember one of my exams, I definitely go against. No, I disagree. This will never work. But I did not realize I wanted to pass the exam. So I can go complaining, but in the end, you will not pass the exam in the end. So that is great. And before somebody might have a doubt around the PMP and the value of the PMP, now you need to consider almost 100% every company around the globe is using the PMI framework, but they do exactly what PMI tell them to do to customize to your own needs, which means that every company, 50% of the time, they're using the PMI framework, but for another 50%, they make it, tweak it on a way that is best for them. And that's why you might see deviations, or sometimes even you see exactly the same. Because, for example, if you are in a construction industry and, delivering, houses, bridges, I mean, for you guys, delivering things on Agile Scrum manner, that's maybe the most challenging because you never see them before, because everything else is almost a copy paste and is working exactly the same way. So that's why. One good question regarding the calculations. So how many calculation questions you had? Do you remember?
How many drag and drop questions?
No, calculations. Calculations first.
Oh, calculations. I had one or two, but they weren't me actually calculating anything. They were making sure you understand the concept behind it. So, like understanding, you need to understand what CPI or SPI means, right? If something is greater than one or less than one, and to answer the question, but you're not actually calculating or doing the formulas like you will in a mathematical question.
And I would say this is still a hot potato. And because there are still conflicting information. I mean, I fully entitle all of you. If you are already stressed about calculations, you let it go. Whatever calculation question you're gonna get, you answer A and you move on, and you're still passing the exam. And do not be afraid that you're missing something, because every company do this slightly differently, like a budget at completion or EAC. Some companies not even doing those calculations. And then worst case scenario, PMI knows you're gonna Google it up anyway. So I would say that that's not is massively needed, but CPI, SPI, to be able to read project status to numbers, that's still very important. And an ultimate lessons learned, if you attend any other similar PMP free session you might find on LinkedIn, and if there is a session when somebody talks about for an hour about estimate to complete and ETC and earned value calculation questions, you can just simply leave that session because that's not for you. And technically, that's the reality. I mean, we do not need to invest that much time as before, because the previous exam, I fully agree. The previous exam was explicitly said 25 calculation questions. So that's why even we created a brain dump and we write down before the exam all the calculation or the calculation formulas. But because we use them, now we never use them. So you do not even need a brain dump on that, because it's just you better have to be more focused on Agile, for example, as Dyshay has also mentioned. So awesome. I hope that answered the question. Wow. And there is one more from Maria. So in terms of the drag and drop, do you remember the team? So they were like similar, like what we did or what we normally do on this session, the comparison of Agile waterfall, or something more complicated? I don't know.
For the drag and drop.
So
for drag and drop, I think if I can remember correctly, I had questions similar to, they would have the scenario in one column, and then the method or the like they would have the method in the other column. I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
So one of my drag and drop questions was on calculations. And I think it was I had to drag whether like the project was ahead of schedule or behind schedule with the information
Right.
that they had. And then the other one, drag and drop question that I remember had to do with scenario based questions, and then what type of they use either uh traditional or agile
Okay.
concepts that I had to match up with that scenario.
Which is
So
slightly similar than what we would normally do.
yeah, so like what the drag and drop examples that you use in your study sessions were really helpful for me answering those questions.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. All right. Wow. I mean, we covered lots of ground here, lots of good information shared. I really appreciate that, and thank you for that. Now, I'm going to turn to you guys in the audience. If you have any questions towards Dashia, I hope I pronounced it correctly now, is that feel free to raise your hand, and then you can ask your question one by one, or you can add the question into the chat if you like. So feel free to ask questions. That's your chance. Someone who just recently passed the exam. Okay. Also, I'm going to scroll up a little bit that maybe we missed something from previously. Okay, so there was some discussion on the study hall, also where to find it. So if you search for PMI study hall on Google or the PMI website, it will automatically give you that. Okay, Prachi is also confirming PMI study hall worth buying. Well, so PMI is not paying you to mention this. I can agree, even though on the explanation side of things, they are slightly weak on that case. But yeah, it's coming from a source. Okay, Maria, you can go ahead. Maria, you can just simply unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
I'm sorry, I was muted. My question is in regards to the 10-minute break you get after the 60 questions, and how were you able to, how did you manage that? Was it simple to get out of the test room, go to the restroom, do whatever you need to do, and get back in? Because I understand there's a process to check back in. You have to go through, search and all that. So I just wanted to know how that went.
It went very well. I still had like a minute left when I came back in. So I will suggest, please take both of your 10-minute breaks. Your mind is going to need it. Your body's going to need it. So take advantage of those 10-minute breaks. So as soon as I was done with my first 60 questions, I was able to sit for my 10-minute break. I raised my hand. The proctor came in, got me out. And then I was able to go get some things out of my locker. And so on my first break, on my first break, I utilized that to go to the restroom. So I had plenty of time to get a swig of water. I think I took a bite of a bar that I had just so I could keep my sugar levels where I needed them to be, to keep me with some energy. And I went to the restroom. So I had time to do that. I came back and the proctor took me through the security measures again. What's helpful is you're going to remember those same security measures from the first time that you enter. So you already know what the routine is, what they want you to empty out your pockets, whatever. So they allowed me to go through it. I remember everything they asked me the first time really quick. When I sat back down, I still had at least a minute and 30 seconds to just, okay, decompress, get right. I still took all of that time as well. And then about the last 10 seconds is when I put my headphones back on and they logged me back in to begin my exam.
Okay.
On my second 10-minute break, I didn't have to go to the restroom, but I did a lot of stretching during that time and just kind of, motivating myself, just taking some breathers, and getting back into the right mindset. And so 10 minutes is definitely enough time, but I do suggest utilizing those. They give you a scratch piece of paper. So when I first got into my exam, I wrote down my minute stops for me. So I think I think I left, what did I do mine at? I think I gave myself maybe
70 minutes?
80
Okay, 80
minutes or
minutes.
70. So my last part, I'm not that great in math. So what was it, Gabriel? 230.
So technically, there's so just for everyone. So the timer is a countdown, not
Yes.
a normal kind of timer go up. So you go 230 minutes minus, go downward. So I would say with that 80 minutes. So 230 minutes to 150. So that's your first block. Then you took the 10 minutes break. Then you go from 150 to 80 minutes, and you're gonna be still, have another 10 minutes to spare in the end, and it will work. So.
Yeah. So come up with a time that works for you. Like if you know you want to be done with your first 60 questions by this particular time period, write that down so you can remember. So when you're looking at the clock, you're like, okay, I know I have to get done within this time frame. And that's what I did, because that was helpful for me. So I just kind of wrote down when I wanted to be done with my first 60 questions to keep me on track for all three three sessions.
So that break is ultimately up to you then?
Yes, the break is optional. You do not have to take it, but I highly suggest taking that break.
But you do have to initiate it. So say if my goal is to have 60 questions answered, no matter how long it took me to answer them, at that point I raise my hand to take my break.
Yes. Yeah. So the timer doesn't stop until you hit 60 questions. And at that time, they give you the option. So if it takes you a whole 2 hours to do the first 60 questions, that's not good, but they give you that time. So that means you have really less amount of time on the other two sections, but you can't take a break until you finish your first 60. And once you finish your first 60 questions, they will ask you, do you want to take a break? And you have the option of yes or no. And if you say yes, then your 10 minutes will start, and then the proctor will escort you out of the room.
Okay.
So Maria, the software will ask you. So software will ask you, are you willing to, or you want to take a break now? And then you hit yes, and then you raise your hand, and then the proctor guy will come in, not the other way around.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good, good, good. One more question on the chat. So what was your, prior experience going to doing the PMP?
So I'm assuming my prior work experience.
Yeah.
So unofficially, I am a program and project manager because I do compliance. And within that, I've conducted projects within that program, so individualized projects that obviously have a start and end date. In order to make some part of that program function, projects had to be completed. And then I also run a program to maintain federal compliance with the government. I work in higher education. And so that's kind of what my background is. And so that's another good point. You don't have your job title doesn't officially have to be project manager in order for you to take the PMP or apply. You just have to make sure that you're relaying the transferable skills and knowledge that you have doing certain projects within your role into your application. And so hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we do have time for one more question. After that, we need to kind of carry on with the slides to make sure that we have the learning as well. So one more question towards Dashia and her success story there. Anyone has any questions? In that case, I would say thank you very much for coming in. I think this was very, very useful. Congratulations again for passing this awesome exam itself. Okay, the last one there regarding the finishing the application. If you might can stay online and maybe just answer that, or maybe one or two questions. If you can do that would be awesome. But all in all, congratulations. You joining the study group. You're hearing also other people passing. Now you're coming here and then telling the other people your story. I think that's one of the most rewarding feeling in terms of the study group itself. Thank you very much for joining. It is great. And hopefully you have a big party again, maybe an after party just to celebrating the PMP, because even though there's like 1.7 million PMPs, the demand is just going to be, I would say, huge to 10 million, even more. So there's still, I would say, a small group of people, but the demand is even more to get more and more PMPs out there. So thank you very much for coming in. If you might can stay a little bit, maybe 5 more minutes for answering any question on chat, I think that would be great.
Thank you. And thank you for offering this free resource for us. We really appreciate you.
Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm happy to make some difference there. Thank you very much. Alrighty, so let me quickly save this one. And again, I mean, this is one of the best part of the session, but also we need to move forward with some